Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. I am Cynthia, the founder of screenlessplaymore.com, and I am so excited. I have Kat Zilka with me today from Disconnect, and she's just going to tell us a little bit about what it is and why it's so important and how everybody can get involved. So, Kat, can you tell us a little bit about Disconnect and what made you decide to create it and kind of what was your path?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me on, Cynthia. I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited to be here. Um, so I have spent my career as a classroom teacher, actually, 15 years in the classroom, teaching a
Wow.
range of grades from fifth grade to 12th grade, really, over the years. And that's the profession I thought I was going to be in. Then COVID hit.
Yep.
And in 2021, so fast forward a little bit from 2020, I was teaching a senior level elective. So for 12th grade students, they had wanted to take an English elective. I was teaching it. And at the end of the unit, so this is like still high COVID, basically. Like we're
Mhm.
still, as a teacher, I'm still in the classroom taking temperatures, making sure kids are separated, monitoring for coughing, like all of that heightened kind of awareness around their physical state. And I hadn't been as attentive to the mental health decline, frankly, that was occurring among
Mhm.
my students. It just wasn't top of mind since their physical health was so top of mind and was taking up so much space. At the end of the semester of this elective, I had just watched The Social Dilemma.
So
Are
good.
you familiar with it?
I
Yes.
love that. Yes. I would highly
And
recommend it to everyone.
it is a fantastic documentary. You can find it on Netflix. And the premise is basically tech execs who have left their positions, high up tech execs, exposing the industry and exposing the reality of what it is of what the tech industry, especially social media, is
And that
doing
they're
to our brains.
purposefully engineering it
Hmm.
to addict us all.
That was the documentary that introduced me to the idea of brain hacking,
Mm.
which I had not ever heard of before. But the fact that these companies hire social scientists to research and implement uh, techniques that, without really our conscious consent, make us more reliant and addicted to social media. And I was just blown away. So I thought, well, my students need to watch this. But I had a small purview just being an English teacher. So I thought, well, at the end of the semester, I'll add it as an optional prompt for one of their essays that they write at the end of the semester. So I just wrote, watch The Social Dilemma and write a short essay on your relationship to your phone. It was rather tangentially related to the topic of the course, so I didn't really expect many of them to choose it. But when I
Mhm.
sat down over my winter break to grade these essays, it really was surprising to see that over half of them had chosen that prompt. And so I was surprised just from that, like, oh, this interested them. Then when I went to actually read these essays, I will be honest with you, Cynthia, I couldn't even get through all of them. They were so heartbreaking. In all of my years as an English teacher, I had never encountered such raw cries for help
Wow.
in their writing. I was very upset, viscerally upset, by what I was reading. I had one kid say that they had downloaded and deleted TikTok 30 times in 40 days and that they couldn't stop.
Wow.
Another kid said, I stay up all night and my parents have no idea. I'm all alone. Another kid said, I just wish that one adult understood how hard this is for me. Another kid said, the best time of my life was camp, not just because they took my phone, but they took everyone's phones.
Yep.
So
And these guys are 12th grade?
these were
Okay.
seniors, so 17 and 18-year-olds. So I, what had become just a tertiary assignment turned into a pivot for me in my entire career because I suddenly felt responsible. I didn't see anyone around me, this was in 2021, talking about this issue, addressing it, helping teens have a voice in it. Um, I also didn't know what to do. This was uncharted territory, but I knew I had to do something because I couldn't read what I read and go back and just
Right.
pretend like I hadn't read it. Honestly, if you were to read the essays and insert another substance like
Hmm.
alcohol or drugs into in place of the phone or in place of social media, it would have been addicts crying for help. Like that was the tenor of the
You would have almost been
communication.
like a mandatory reporter, kind of.
Uh-huh. Really, honestly, that was the level I felt. Like, oh my gosh, these children are in crisis.
Wow.
And again, we had been so focused on their physical health. It wasn't even on the radar to think about the mental health to any significant degree, except just everyone surviving and getting through, you know?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm going to cough. um,
And they had just spent a whole year at home with probably untethered access to their phones and
Mhm.
to whatever during the pandemic.
Exactly. So what was already, I think, happening as a trajectory of this being a main way that teenagers connected and had a social outlet was expedited because of COVID, right? Because it ended up being their only outlet for social interaction at the time in development when one of the most important features of teen development and of adolescent development is social interaction. And so I get the kind of the impulse to have it no matter what. And unfortunately, the device was there to bridge that gap. So I decided that I would start a course called Digital Detox. I made it an
Interesting.
English, yeah, I made it an English elective, and we launched it in the fall of 2023. I got up and pitched the course to seniors and I begged six of them to enroll. And I held my phone up and I said, I don't know what this device is doing to us, but we're going to figure it out together in an experimental course I'm running called Digital Detox. And I thought, oh my God, teenagers are not going to want to take this course. Like, this is going to be a hard sell. Maybe I'll get six who are kind of into like,
Right.
alternative ways of thinking. I had a full enrollment and a wait list.
Wow. Like you said, it's a cry for help.
And
Wow.
the first day I walked into class and I was like, okay, we're doing this. They applauded spontaneously.
Wow.
I had never had that as a teacher. And we went on a journey. There was 18 kids and we went on a journey together that semester of just exploring these devices through writing, through discussion, through reading, and through all of these kind of activities that I developed that some worked, some didn't.
Hmm.
But we really it was a life-changing experience, I think, for everyone in the class and for myself. And at the end, I surveyed them throughout. And at the end of the course, I asked them in one of the surveys, what are some of the elements I should never change about this class? And the things that they ended up choosing were all of the social emotional learning elements that I had included,
Okay.
not necessarily the academic pieces. And for instance, at the beginning of every single class, I had them do something that we ended up calling the sit. And the very first thing they did when they came in is they would surrender their phone and then sit for 10 minutes and do nothing.
That's great.
And
Because nobody does that anymore, especially
Mhm,
kids.
exactly. And it was the first time I had done it in a long time, right? And the first time that they had ever done it, really. And it was like a little bit like pulling teeth at first, but halfway through the semester, they loved it. They would just come in and be like, I don't want to miss this. I need this. I would play a little bilateral music, and then they would just kind of all find a spot in the classroom away from kind of the center of the learning area, just in their own space. And they would just sit. And there was no rule about what you did except you couldn't lay down. because teenagers, when they're given a chance
Yep.
to recline, then they're exhausted. Honestly, the first
Oh,
thing that would come up
yes.
would be they would come back from the sit and be like, I'm exhausted.
Ugh.
I didn't even know I was so tired,
Yeah.
you
You're
know.
just running on adrenaline.
And they have no idea, like, we're not in touch with that, right? Our
Yeah.
internal states are really out of touch to us in a lot of ways, because of the devices and the way we live our modern life, in my opinion. And so so the number one thing they said not to change was the sit. And I was like,
Interesting.
okay, so all of the academic work I did, all of the books I prepared, all of this stuff. And they're like, don't change the thing where you don't do anything
That's so
about
interesting.
it. They loved it. I even had one kid who came up to me in the hall one time in the middle of the semester, and he's like, hey, Miss Zilka, kind of weird, but I've started to like sit on my own.
Good.
I
But
think
that
that's great.
it really, really tells you what they needed, what they
Yes.
craved. If from morning till night, you're going, 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 and then that's one of my things about having this computer in your pocket. You don't ever have time to be bored or to daydream or to just take a breath because it's like we all grew up in a time when you're standing in line at the DMV and you just have to stand in line at the DMV and stare at the wall
Exactly.
and people watch and take a breath and be patient. And now you can do whatever the heck you want on your phone. And so there's just absolutely no time for these kids
There's no downtime.
to just. I mean, I have this theory that everybody now comes up with great ideas in the shower because it's the only time they don't have their phone.
That's great.
You
I think that's true.
Oh, yeah, because that's when your mind gets to wander. And that's what you used to get to do
Yeah.
on a walk, sitting on a bench, riding a bus, whatever. And now you got your nose in the phone.
Hmm.
So that's very, very telling that they just needed that so badly.
They took to it. And I, again, trepidatious over here, thinking I was trepidatious, being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to ask teenagers to do this. But it was like a dry desert, right? They were just soaking it up. And they were soaking up anything, any conversation, any opportunity to express where they were at with this. They just were waiting for that invite, at least the teenagers I was working with. But at the end of the semester, again, having had access to more of their like psyches, like what they were more willing to share, I recognized that a huge part of the mental health crisis, a huge piece of it, I believe, was also academic pressure.
Okay.
And I realized, like, in some sense, the course was competing with its own objectives, because I was giving a grade. They were having to do writing, they were having to do all this reading, which is fine. That's important work. However, the real meaningful formative change was occurring through these other mechanisms, like through the sit, for instance, and through some of the other pieces that we were doing. And so I kind of took a step back and looked at everything and thought, more than anything, this is kind of like a support group.
Mhm.
And
Well, like you're
so I
saying,
just
it was an addiction anyway. So it was like the AA that they needed.
Exactly. And that I'm glad you brought that up, because I began to think about AA and some of these organizations that exist to support people through community connection to recover from addictive behaviors. And
Mhm.
I thought, well, we need to bring kids together, teens together, to talk about this, give them maybe a little bit of information, but really empower them to make conscious, good choices around their devices by giving them the ability to understand them more deeply and giving them the accountability of a support group of some kind. So I took some of the key elements that they really valued and put them together in a meeting flow. Basically, it's a framework, and it's a 60-minute framework that is a support group model for teens who are addicted to their phones.
Mhm.
And it's been pretty powerful to see kids heal their relationship to their devices and to themselves through a support group model, such as, like, similar to something like AA, although it is very different in a lot of ways. But it's the same, like, fundamental idea. Like, there's proof of concept there for these kinds of groups
So
working.
this 6 minute group, is that what disconnect is?
That is the heart of what we do.
Okay.
We run
Um,
meetings.
quickly before we jump into disconnect, I'm very curious. You were a teacher at this time. Were you finding that kids were just on their phones all the time and it was difficult to get their attention? Or what was your relationship with kids' phones as a teacher?
I was very much against phones in the learning environment. And I was lucky enough to be at a school most recently where they had a phone policy where you collected the phones and put them in phone pockets by the door.
Okay.
Now, teachers followed that to different degrees. I was notorious, apparently, kids told me later, for being very strict about it. Like I would go and check and be like, whose phone is missing?
Good.
And then
Hmm.
there'd be like a sheepish like so I wouldn't start class unless all the phones were up. And but I will say that like another moment for me, this was the same year I was teaching that class, was I ran a field trip for ninth graders. We went to a play and we decided we were going to collect all their phones. Again, so many schools were just flying by the seat of their pants around so many policies, right? Suddenly
Hmm.
we have a bunch of teenagers with with these powerful devices in their pockets. And we're like, okay, so do we let them have them for field trips? Do we not? Like,
Hmm.
and so we decided, no, I was big on, no, we're collecting them for field trips. So we collected all of these phones for field trips. This is like over like around 100 ninth graders. And we went on the field trip, went on the bus, came back. We were gone from like 9 a.m. to like 2 p.m. And when we got back, we had these boxes of the where the phones had been deposited. And I was standing at the table, and when I tell you the feeling of fiending was in the room, like I
Wow.
felt swarmed and overwhelmed. Kids were pushing each other out of the way to get their devices. Like it was so, and I just was like watching this and I was thinking, I wish I could record this only because it's so demonstrative
Yeah.
of the withdrawal that these kids are
Yeah.
feeling.
Wow.
And I will say I didn't. We got back and had lunch, and the entire lunch they were like, "When do I get my phone? When do I get my phone? When do I get my phone?" I got asked that so many times, and I was like, "After lunch, you can have your phone after."
Wow.
So yeah, so it was definitely like an ongoing battle in the school environment of just even just having the phone present, right, in the halls, walking, all of those things. You just can over time, once you start to wake up to it, you see the impact on the entire culture of the
Because, I
school.
mean, what I'm hearing is, there's so many high schools where it's silent in the hall because everybody's staring at their phone. There's no horsing around, there's no fighting, there's no
Yep.
joking, there's no laughing. There's just silence, which
This
just,
had never happened to me as a teacher, but I started to enter classrooms and it'd be full of kids waiting to start class, complete silence. 17 and 18-year-olds and complete silence. I started to point it out. I'd come in and just say really loudly, "Do you all know how creepy it is to walk into a room of this many humans and have not a sound?"
yeah.
And it's true. You used to have to walk into a high school classroom as a high school teacher and be like, "Calm down,
Yeah,
get
break it
a
up,
room."
guys, break it up. Like, stop throwing stuff at the board. Well, and the thing that's so sad to me is like that's when the relationships form. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all the inside jokes I have with my girlfriends from high school is like quickly saying something right before the teacher walks in or during passing periods or like we still joke about some
Yeah.
of those things that we
Yes.
created during high school. And if you're just staring at your phone, you're missing out. And I think it's interesting that like what you found is that I feel like a lot of these kids they're just wishing an adult would step up and take those things away because they can't keep themselves away from it. They need somebody to make the rule. It's like, "Oh, I don't want to have this in my hand. I'm addicted to it, but my parents have decided that I have the ability to decide whether I want to or whether I don't." And like they were telling you like, "No, I really don't have the ability. Like I'm actually addicted and I need someone to take it away from me."
Yeah. It's interesting because when teenagers learn that the devices are designed, and especially social media is designed to entrap them, it infuriates them
Good.
because you don't want to be like, as a teenager, you're wired to resist,
Mhm.
right? To rebel. Like there's an internal motivation there to define your uniqueness, and that's part of the development of an adolescent. And being tricked without consent,
Yeah.
that kind of like just even that exposure was huge, at least for the kids in my class, in my original class. When I remember the day we talked about brain hacking and we talked about how they were being tricked, basically these companies were designing these apps to keep them on at all times without their explicit conscious consent. And they were so angry. They were livid.
I'm glad, because it's going to be really sad if we get to a point where people are like, okay, that's fine. Like, you should be mad. So
You
I'm
should
glad
be
that they were.
mad. Yeah, I like to say to my teens, my attention is mine to give.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to choose where I give it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not something that a company just gets to automatically have access to or own. Like my attention is one of my wealthiest commodities in my life now. And so to give it is to give something to an organization or a company. And I want to be in a place where I'm consenting to that meaningfully.
Yeah. Well, so then you did the class, and I'm also curious, did they continue teaching that same class once you were not at the school?
My understanding is no.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Yeah. Um, but I was able to take those lessons from that class and develop this model and invite a few teens to help test it out with me. So we piloted this format and framework and refined it through teenager input. So we would meet once a week, and I would call it my beta test group. We met all summer, and we'd go through the framework, the support group model, and refine it. And I'd say, does this feel like school? Does this work? Does this not work? And we'd change and modify things. They also came up with things to add. The very first thing we do in our group is we do something called Celebrate. That came directly from the students or from the teens. We celebrate any PRs, so any personal records for screen time averages, because at the beginning of the meeting, they actually record their weekly screen time average in their top app. So every meeting they go to, they have a record of their person, like they have a personal record of accountability for their screen time average in their top app. And they power down their phone and store it in a little sleeve with on the outside is where they record all of their data. So I joke that screen time averages are very personal. So I never look at it. They don't have to share. It is a very like kind of, do I have to share my screen time, right? Feeling.
Mhm.
So it's just for their own accountability, basically. And then we turn in the phones, and then they come into the circle. And the first thing they do is they celebrate any phone successes from the week, small or major, any personal records. And we high five and like get excited if I had one kid start in January, and they were at like a 5 hour screen time average, that's pretty good for a
Is
teenager,
this
to be honest,
per day or per week?
per day.
Okay.
Um,
That
five is not,
still kind of blows my mind that people are on
it's,
phones for 5 hours a day.
oh yeah. I had one of the kids in my class when she started, she had a 10-hour screen time average a day.
Yeah, I think the national average is probably around 7, is what I've
Yes.
heard. Wow.
So yeah, so this kid was at 5 and recently got it down to under 2 hours.
Wow.
And so
Because
we were high
otherwise
fiving.
that's literally a full-time job. I mean, it's unreal. 10 hours a day is more than a full-time job. So that means they have to be watching at school. Like, probably. I mean, otherwise, or they're just, that's all coming out of their sleep, and it's coming out of any sort of after school
Right.
time. And
Those in between times.
wow.
Yeah. And screen time average, it includes a lot of things. It's not just socials, although most teens, their top one will be a social app. Their
Mhm.
top app will be a socials app. And I kind of count some of that as like social interaction. There
Right.
is a degree to which they do have their social needs met, and not even a degree. There's some real meaningful ways that their social needs are met through their phones. But none of them, I don't think, want as high as screen time averages. Many of them don't want as high as screen time averages as they have. They want to have more control,
Mhm.
right? They want to have more choice in it. And so this is what we're trying to do, is help them raise their consciousness, their awareness, so they can make better choices. So, and then the second thing we do in the celebrate time is we actually celebrate slow media.
Okay.
And this has been a pretty powerful piece of what we do, because the idea is that, just like with fast food and a home cooked meal, it's not that fast food is just always bad. You should never have it, but it's to be cautious around it, right? It's
Hmm.
not healthy to have a ton of fast food. It's better for you to have a home cooked meal more
Hmm.
regularly than fast food. In the same way, we talk about fast media being anything that's algorithmic, that is fed to you, that's short form, and that's scrolling, being like kind of the least healthy thing for you on your phone.
Hmm.
Um, and we talk about how we can trade in fast media for slow media. Slow media could be a good film.
Hmm.
It could be a great television series, even an album you listen to, a sports game you watch, podcasts. There's book,
Audiobook.
books, absolutely, yes. And so we share slow media recommendations with one another in our
That's
meeting.
cool.
And we've had so much success with this. One girl last summer, she was like, I really want to stop double screening, which is when you have a screen on and you use a screen.
Got it. Okay.
And she was like, so the way she was going to do that was, she's like, I can't get into like prestige TV right now, or like a really fancy film. She's like, I think I need to be realistic. I'm going to rewatch the Twilight trilogy. And so she left her phone in the other room and rehabbed from double screening by crocheting
Okay.
and watching Twilight.
And giving
And
Twilight not her
her full
full
attention.
attention because she was doing crocheting, but
That's true.
certainly more than if she had a screen.
And the genius part about that is that she found something to do with her hands,
Yeah.
because there was an impulse in her to do something,
Hmm.
with her hands while she was engaging with the slower media on the television. Another girl last summer, she came in and she goes, all right, I have an announcement, everyone. I learned how to turn on my family's television for the first time.
Well, a couple of things come to mind for that. First of all, I really relate to the crocheting because one of my children has ADHD and he loves watching a movie or a show, but he does need something else going on. And for a while, he would say, Mom, can I play Minecraft on the phone while we watch this? And it just makes me real uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, that's two things going on. That's a lot for your brain. And I've let him do it a couple of times, but now I've finally gotten to the point where I say, let's figure something else out. And so it's like, he does Legos or he just something else with his hands, because I know he does need to have his hands
Yes.
busy, but it doesn't need to be a screen. And I've also got a good friend who has ADHD and she brings her knitting to the movie theater. She just knows that she needs that. And, so some people need it. Like not everybody is just going to stare right at the screen and be 100% there. But I really wonder what that's doing to your brain when you're doing double screens, because you're certainly not paying full attention to either one of those. Like you're getting a little of both. But, and I'm
Well,
really glad you pointed out kind of quote unquote good screens versus bad screens. What did you say? Slow versus fast?
slow media versus fast
Okay, I
media.
like that because
Yeah,
it's not judging whether it's good or bad. It's just slow versus fast, because the irony of
exactly.
all this is that I'm actually a screenwriter. I mean, that's what I went to school to do. I have my master's in screenwriting. I love movies. I have watched
Mhm.
a ton of movies, and I really want my kids to see a ton of movies, especially just classic ones through the years, ones that are just those memorable, popular ones throughout the last 100 years that everybody talks about, everybody quotes. So I'm more than happy to have us all sit down and have family movie night and watch something. I'm just not in love with the fast media, like you're saying, video games, TikTok, social media. This is the sort of stuff that we don't have a lot of data on, and we're noticing that it's not doing great things to our brain. We've got a lot of data on movies and television and what it does to us and what it doesn't do to us. And there's a huge difference in the socialization of sitting around a show with your whole family or being in a theater with 100 people versus there's just that loneliness factor when you're just on your phone, not even just in your room. Like you're saying, you could be in the classroom with 20 other students and you feel so alone because you're just on your screen and so is everybody else. And you wouldn't have quite the same feeling if you were in a room with 20 people watching the same film. So,
Exactly. I'm glad you bring the community aspect up because I was going to share another anecdote that highlights that point. So after we started to talk about this, and again, I'm discovering a lot of this with them, right?
mhm.
So we're kind of codifying what we're doing as I'm going through with them, and they're coming in and saying, "Oh my God, this worked, this worked." So when the one student or when the one team came in and said, "I figured out how to turn on my family television," the next week another team came in, kind of inspired by that, and said, "Okay, so I just turned on the family TV and put my phone away, and people came out of their rooms and watched it."
That's funny.
And she said, but the one rule, and this is hard for my dad, but the one rule was you couldn't have your phone out. You're going to watch this, whatever it was. And I was like, that's great. You're becoming a leader. And
Yeah.
that's really one of the visions of our organization is helping transform teens and young adults from being tech victims to tech leaders, because they actually have the most to teach us about this.
Yeah.
And when they are empowered, man, they're on fire. And they will go toe to toe with their parents. I've had some teens go toe to toe with their parents about their younger siblings not getting a device.
Okay.
And just like really trying to become the leaders that we need as a society, because they understand the device and everything it can do way better than most adults, right? There's a real generational divide here, but they also understand the harms at a level that we don't have access to.
Yeah.
So peer leadership around this is key. And our organization is all about that peer leadership model. Like I am a facilitator and I'm the founder of the organization, but I feel like my entire purpose is enabling teens to become the leaders that we need as a society around tech, because tech's not going away.
hmm
So we're raising our consciousness around it and reducing the harm and empowering teens to help one another. So that's what I see already occurring from the reports that they bring back from their families is I'm helping my whole family make better choices around these devices because they honestly see their parents addicted.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them, their parents' screen time is worse than theirs now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about that because your mission statement on the website says we inspire teens and young adults to reset their relationships with screens and help their communities do the same. So I was curious of like, does the community mean their family? Does the community mean their town, their nation, all of it? And like
All of
kind of
it.
it's like they're starting perhaps with their families or their siblings, but have any of the kids started getting into like they want to write the legislature, they want to change, they want their school to have a no phone policy. Like, is anybody getting like real deep into it yet?
Well, that is so one of the things we're a new organization, but one of the things we're developing is an internship program. And one of the things I want to be part of that internship program is them designing in a place they can make an impact and selecting that over the course of a year. And so whether that's in their school and their families and their churches and their synagogues, wherever they, are, I believe that they can create really using the meeting framework, they can create support for all kinds of people. But one of the things I do right now is we run digital wellness workshops, and a team comes along with me and co-leads it with me. So we do 75-minute workshop. You experience the teen framework and then have time for Q&A with a teen at the end. And that's the main way we push into the community right now is running these workshops for adults, basically, that are interested in the model, want to learn more. And the teen helps me facilitate it and talks about their own experience doing the meetings and what it's done for them.
And is that adult then after the workshop theoretically going to start their own group, or it's just for them to know in their own life how to monitor their screen
Yeah,
time?
it's for exposure to their own, like to raise their own consciousness around their device use. But the idea would be then that we would have more access through those adult connections to more teens. So like eventually we really want to bring our program into schools.
Okay.
Right
And
now
then
we do our program independently, but I want to bring it into schools and have meetings regularly in schools. So that's what we're working towards right now.
it would be like an after school program,
It
like
could
a
be.
club basically, or would it be like you'd be asking schools to incorporate it into curriculum?
I think ideally this could be part of the school day.
Okay.
I mean, the 60-minute framework we have is um, is pretty easy to learn
Hmm.
and has the regularity of it, just like with AA or something like that, is what ends up making the difference long term.
Hmm.
So the workshop is kind of meant to expose you to the initial ideas, but really we want to create programming that is lasting and goes on for, makes an impact where people can come to the meetings and experience it, and teens especially, and feel a difference in their lives.
I think this is genius. It had never occurred to me that you could have, digital detox as a part of curriculum. And now that you say it, I think it's probably the most important thing we could do because, you know, my friends and I always joke that there's so many classes in high school that you've absolutely completely forgotten about, but you're thinking, wow, wish they had taught me how to do my taxes, wish they had taught me how to balance my checkbook. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that parents may or may not teach you, but you think, boy, that would have been useful in high school. And I can't think of a single thing that impacts their lives more than phones and technology. Because as you say, if there is something you are doing for 10 hours a day, it would be very good to understand the ins and outs of it, why you're being lured in, how you're being manipulated by the social media or by the device. Or I mean, I think that's just so important for kids. It's sort of like we're saying, everybody needs to start figuring out what's fake news, what's real, what are your trusted sources, just being a smart consumer of all types of media, being discerning, and like you said, having a choice in it, not just being led into something that you don't even realize, or like they had in the social dilemma, like being radicalized, or just having kids be aware of what this is doing to them and choosing, what, I'm standing in line and I want to play such and such game, I'm choosing to do this. But understanding that, like, sometimes it's not a choice, sometimes you just, it's a just reflex, like, I think that is so cool that it could be a part of school curriculum. And I think that that's a really important idea.
Yeah, I think so. The work we're doing in our organization, I believe, addresses phones, but I think it also has something to say about the way that we educate kids in general right now, because AI has really created a little bit of a major crisis, right,
Hmm.
around content standards.
Hmm.
So if I see my main job as an educator as providing content to students, I am now I'm not as good as AI at providing content. I'm
Hmm.
not as good as AI at providing information. I'm not as good at AI even as teaching how to write a 5-paragraph essay.
Hmm.
Like AI is really good at these things now. And I left the classroom right when it was picking up speed as an English teacher. And I was like, thank goodness I'm getting out of here because I don't really know how to conceive of my job even anymore, now that AI is here to stay. But something that gives me hope and that I think is very important that I'd started to focus on as an educator before I left the classroom was the idea of competencies. And competencies being things that, um, ways that we help bring up a child so that they have flexible thinking, creativity, these like core functions that we have as humans that we can help develop in other humans that aren't about measuring the amount of content they know around a subject or in a certain discipline, but about how they are able to navigate the world through the development of certain aspects of their brain. Like critical thinking is a competency.
Mm-hmm.
Creative problem solving is a competency. Certain social behaviors are competencies. And I believe those can be taught, those can be encouraged, those can be brought up into children. And in fact, I would argue that that should be a big part of what we do right now in schools,
Mm-hmm.
given where we're at as a society and what we have in terms of technology. So I've been saying to my board, and I'll say it here, that I think every kid starting a day with a disconnect meeting is huge, right? You turn in your phone, you do this framework, and then you go on your day. And the best part about our meetings is you end with hobby time. So they all kind of have a hobby that they're working on: knitting, card shuffling, crocheting, juggling. One kid learned to juggle. They
Very
all have
cool.
these hobbies, that they're
Mm-hmm.
working on. And oftentimes they can be a little bit mindless, or they can be a little more meaningful. Depends on where they're at. A lot of them are creative expressions. But to your point about the rise of ADD and ADHD, how cool would it be if kids then had that thing to bring to classes the rest of the day? They had their knitting,
Mm-hmm.
they had their Legos, right? And yeah, teachers would immediately, I get it. I've been a classroom teacher, freak out a little bit about that. Like, oh my God. But also, what's the alternative? We're managing a lot of kids who are really struggling to
Mm-hmm.
attend, to be available. I had one kid who took my digital detox class. She learned to knit. She had ADHD. She was having a lot of issues in the classroom. She brought her knitting around to different classes, and they heard from multiple teachers she's doing better.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was one teacher who was cranky about it and wouldn't let her do it.
Right.
And I was
And,
like, you're not necessarily making the connection here. This is helping her academically.
right. And the teachers they're going to have to deal with this because, yes, of course, there's kids that truly have a diagnosed ADHD and it could possibly or probably run in their family. Like our family has a long line of it. So it's very obvious when my child was even very, very young. But because of the fragmented attention that's happening around phones, so many kids are getting symptoms of ADHD, whether they clinically have it or not. And they are having just a hard time staring at one thing because the dopamine that they're getting from this constant gaming, constant scrolling, constant whatever makes the rest of the world seem real boring. And so if you're listening to an English lecture, you're probably going to seem like you have ADHD because you're fidgeting, you're bored compared to what you've been doing on your phone. And so I think the more that teachers can lean into some of these things, like letting them have a fidget or a hobby or something to get through and be able to pay attention because their brains are rewiring. They're becoming so used to having 6 different things going on at once. It's very hard to pay attention to one thing. And if this is the new normal, we are going to certainly have to flex as a society, as a school district, as teachers. And
Mm-hmm. We're at a real inflection point, I think, for a lot of things because of technology and now how I like to say, and I see this, that the phones often are extensions of their nervous systems at this point. Like they're a soothing device. So
mhm,
you're anxious, you're nervous, you pull out your phone and you feel better, because it gives you a thing to do when you feel a certain way.
totally.
And it's a lovey, you
It's a
know?
glass of wine. It's
Yes.
it's a numbing device. Absolutely. Well, I
And
wonder what you
I think
think.
it also does regulate their nervous system too, but then it also undermines it
Mhm.
simultaneously, just like a glass of wine would, right? Where at first there's a good feeling to that, there's a soothing feeling, but the dividends are diminishing really fast,
Right, right.
and like so fast, like within the first 5 minutes.
Mm.
Um, the brain wants to be at that hedonic set point, right? To use Anna
Mhm.
Lemke's phrasing. Um, and so if you give your brain a lot of pleasure up front, the pain's going to have to come. So that's where we get that doom scrolling or bed rot or all of those feelings that the kids talk about. We coined a phrase in my group called that throw your phone feeling. One girl, she's thrown her phone twice and broken it because she got so sick and overwhelmed after hours of scrolling.
Oh, wow. Huh. I'm wondering what you think about technology in the classroom and how much of that you were seeing before you left. Like, I know my kindergartner had a Chromebook and still does now in first grade. I mean, they've got it all the way through from kindergarten to 12th, and they do, I think there's a pro and a con. I mean, they do some programs that in some ways are self-led, and it's kind of nice that, if my son wants to just keep going and going and going and learn more and more and be on level 17 when some other kid is on level 3 and some other kid is on level 12 or whatever, that's kind of nice that it's individualized, but it's a lot of screen time during the day. And again, it's gamifying learning so that again there's this dopamine involved of like, oh, I got the math problem right. I get a heart or a sword or whatever it is in my game. And then boy, a worksheet sure seems boring, and this test sure seems boring, and reading a real book sure seems boring. And like, how much of that were you into, and how much was your school making you guys use technology for teaching? How much of a choice was it for you? And was it problematic or was it helpful?
I mean, it's a big question. I'm a believer right now in giving people as much information, school districts, administrators, and teachers, as much information as we can, and giving them access. Like, that's why a digital wellness workshop would be great for teachers, because this is an opportunity for them to examine and look at the devices more meaningfully instead of defaulting to them. So I think that I wouldn't pretend to be in a position to like recommend policies, but I do think that uh, the one-to-one policies that a lot of schools adopted should be re-examined, and possibly like the idea is like, if you give a child a device this early on, you are saying to them, this device is good and important for your learning. And that association alone, I think, is a little bit problematic.
And one-to-one
Um,
policy, does that mean one computer
that
per
means
one
like
child?
every child in the school has a device that they have access to. So they have their own personal device, right? There's not like a shared computer in the classroom.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, so a lot of the schools would have started, like the school I was at, it started to give devices in third grade, and now is like re-examining
Hmm.
that. But it's like, well, you did it at the beginning, and now you're telling the kids to get off their phones in high school.
Yeah.
And so there's and kids are smart, they understand hypocrisy, and they see that conflict. Now I give adults benefit of the doubt. None of us knew.
Yeah.
We didn't know. We were all just smoking indoors. We didn't know.
Hmm.
you know
Smoking or non, I'm like, it's still gonna travel over to my part of the restaurant.
Right,
I love the thought
exactly,
of smoking
exactly.
sections on an
Smoking
airplane.
section.
What?
But this is like a good equivalency, I think, in many ways. Not perfect, but like, my parents were in the generation where their parents smoked in the car and indoors with them,
Yeah.
and then later on quit smoking altogether once they realized what it was doing to them and their kids.
Right.
But not before it was too late, not before there was a huge impact on their health. And I think about that a lot. Like, we jumped right in,
Yep.
seeing some of the benefits of this, and the harms, now we're cleaning up a lot of the harms.
Yeah.
And
I,
I just think teachers and administrators need to be given a chance to examine this and talk about it, because every school is going to have to make their own decisions, and every district's going to have to make their own decisions about what's best for their kids. Because there are some places where I wouldn't like presume to know what would be best for the
Mhm.
kids in that environment, right? Assistive technology can be really important. Sometimes one-to-one devices do aid in the learning in meaningful ways. So
Right.
it's just not an all or nothing thing. And I think that's the conundrum of tech nowadays, is we don't get to just grab the phone from the kid. We don't get just to throw the smartboard out the window. We don't get to just, be done with the Chromebooks. Like, these are in our lives now. And that's why I believe in harm reduction and raising awareness
Mhm.
rather than black and white, yes and no. We don't have this in our school policies.
Yeah. And I think, we're at the time now where it is sort of like smoking, where it's like we just didn't know for a long time. And we're at this part where we're starting to know. And it took a long time to roll back cigarettes. And I think it's going to take us a long time to roll back what we've done so far with technology. And absolutely, it's happening. It's starting. But I mean, I think in our defense, we knew that TV wasn't a big deal, and we just thought, well, this is just a TV in your pocket, and it's different, and I think we didn't realize that it absolutely does different things to your brain to be watching a 2-second clip of something, or just, a lot of different games, because as we said before, they're engineered in a different way. It's, a television show is basically just a different version of watching a play. It's been around for thousands of years. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end. And what we're watching on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, it's not like that. It's not that format. It's doing different things to our brain. And so, this is going to make me sound like I'm a million years old, but in some ways, I really appreciate the way that technology was rolled out in my life. I was born in 1979. I actually used a typewriter to write papers in 9th grade because my family didn't get a computer until I was in 10th grade when I started being able to type. And then right when I was a freshman in college is when it was like, oh, I had like all the access I wanted to emails. I had like instant messenger and stuff. But so it was like this really nice gradual introduction just because I happened to be at the certain age when these things were introduced. And then it was like Facebook was introduced when I was 27. And then, it's just like little by little by little, I got more and more things in my life and, GPS and just all these things. It was so cool as it came out, but I had already formed my childhood brain and I didn't have constant access to these things. So I know what it was like before. I know what it's like to read a map. I know what it's like to not have Siri tell me where to go. Like I have a lot of skills that I can draw on that I learned before I was 30 that I just feel it. In some ways, I wish every kid got to like very slowly, like, oh, hey, you're 14, here's a computer. Oh, you're 27, here's social media. Like have the maturity. That's never gonna happen. It's just like, oh, you're 10, here's everything. Oh, you're 3, here's an iPad, and we're just maybe we're going to get to that point here where we realize, oh my gosh, it was all too much. It was all too soon. And maybe 50 years from now, we're going to say, that's crazy. Can you believe they gave iPads to 3-year-olds? That's insane. It's just like when we find out that like people would like rub bourbon on a baby's gums for teething or, like I'm hoping we get
still,
to
we don't still do that.
or like smoking in the car with your children. It's like, what? And I'm hoping that we get to the point where we
seatbelts.
Yeah, seatbelts. Like as a society, we realize like this stuff doesn't have to be evil. You just have to have the right maturity for it. Like hopefully we get to
the right regulation around it too.
Right, like you have to be
like seatbelt laws. Seatbelt laws made a big difference for how these giant hunks of metal were impacting the lives of our citizens. Like,
right.
We had children in cars without seatbelts, and these cars are weapons essentially.
Oh, yeah.
These are powerful things that we're in, and I think of the phone that way. I think I am cautious about the smoking analogy just because I think that screens and devices it's so complicated to evaluate the good and the bad of them.
Right.
But I think social media is the equivalency of smoking.
Right.
I think that's when we can kind of hone in and say, more or less, I think I'm at the point of my own research and my own work to be like, social's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I'm not like, and I don't say that about phones. I don't think phones are bad. And I don't think screens and technology in general is bad. I think that these are very powerful devices that
Hmm.
we need to respect, understand, teach how to use, create some, digital wellness and literacy in our classrooms, all of
Right.
this, bring way more awareness to it. But with socials, yeah, I'm ready to like, I
Yeah.
just think it's a pretty morally bankrupt um, section of tech that is hard to stomach once you start to read into it and see it. I don't know if you've read Kara Swisher's book, Burn Book.
No.
That's couldn't recommend it more. It's a, an expose of a bunch of the tech leaders.
Okay.
So there's her experience in Silicon Valley since 1994 as a tech reporter for the Washington Post, and she basically has all of this insider info. So that book is amazing. And then the other book that just came out that I haven't read yet, but everyone's talking about, is Careless People.
Okay. Oh yeah,
Sarah
my friend
Wynne
told me
Sarah
about
Wynne
that.
Williams just got published. She's now been gagged by Facebook. It's a tell-all about Facebook.
Oh
And
wow.
it is, I'm starting it today. I'm so excited. So these whistleblowers, these exposés, these stories are helping us understand how insidious a place like Facebook actually
Right.
has been, and what kind of amount of, really, I mean, what did Zuck have in the original Facebook office? Move fast and break things.
Oh, that was his motto. Well, and that's the thing too, is at the beginning, it really seemed great. Oh my gosh, I can reconnect with somebody from high school. Oh my gosh, Arab Spring. All this stuff seemed really promising. And it's yeah, I think you're right that
I
there's
I
a
do
dark
like
side to
to
it.
I do like to wrinkle my own argument, though. Every time I talk about the ills of social media, I like to wrinkle my own argument and say, the research shows on average, and for the average, or for most teens, social media is detrimental, right? Jonathan Haidt has helped us really see this.
The Anxious
Um,
Generation.
yeah, and I just,
Also a book that I highly recommend. Anxious Generation. Everybody, please read it.
yes, yes, a very informative book. I think his policy recommendations are spot on. I That's a separate conversation, but I sometimes worry that his tone is a little bit off-putting, or like it can encourage, I think, parents to feel like a lot of shame
True.
around what's
True.
happening. But I think his policy recommendations are really, really good. Like, I'm like, he's spot on. He's got great research. He understands the impact of social media on the adolescent brain, and that's real. And that's been, we're starting to measure that. But for me, the wrinkle there is the data, the outliers are there's like one set of outliers where, for whom social media actually increases their sense of self and um, makes them happier and healthier, and that's LGBTQ kids.
I have heard that. Yeah.
And so, it's just, even in the social media realm, we have to be careful, in my opinion, to really understand that it's not ever all or nothing when it comes to these things. But social media companies should be regulated, they should be held accountable,
Right.
and there should be way more guardrails on how it's handled.
And probably
But I
with
do know,
everything, it's moderation. It's like, no, I shouldn't eat 100 candy bars. And even if I'm an LGBTQ plus child, I absolutely you should have your community, but you shouldn't be on it 10 hours a day,
right,
you know?
right. That's
So
not going to be
it's
healthy for anyone. Yeah.
right. If you
Hmm.
don't have anybody you feel like you can talk to in your life or your community, absolutely. I am so excited that that is there for them. And I think it's just needs to be an aspect of their day, an aspect of their
Hmm.
personality. And I mean, yeah, just with all of this stuff, like you're saying, I don't think it's all necessarily evil. I look up all sorts of stuff. It's amazing to have this encyclopedia in your hand. I love I
It
love
truly
having
is.
a map. I love having an encyclopedia. I love having my camera in my hip pocket at all times. I mean, I love so much about it. And even as, I'm being a hypocrite because I use Facebook to promote whatever blog I just
Hmm.
wrote. I mean, that's how
Hmm.
I'm letting people know that I just added something to my site. Catches,
Yeah, it's hard
I
to do
don't
it
sit
without
there
that.
and stare at it for hours and hours a day, because I think it's so easy to get sucked in. Absolutely. At first, I remember, when it first came out, and I'd like look at it at work, and I'd think like, oh, no big deal. Like, I only check it like 5 times a day. And now I realize like, wow, okay, I was actually spending a lot of time, and I know that that's pretty low compared to what a lot of people are doing. But I'll even just shake. It's like I shake myself awake. Like my sister will send me something on Instagram, and I just go down the rabbit hole, and I'm like, wait, I just spent 20 minutes watching hilarious videos. What am I doing? And I think if you realize, like, I'm going to chill. Like, I just had a long day. I just put the kids to bed. I am going to chill, and I want to watch 20 minutes of crazy, hilarious videos. Great. Go for it. That can be, you can just choose what's your poison going to be. Like, what do you want to do right now to chill? But I think like you suddenly realize this just makes time fly. This is a black hole. And you're like, that wasn't 20 minutes. That was an hour and 20 minutes.
No, exactly. I mean, and then when you find out that it's designed to do that, to take your commodity, your one precious life that you have to live, the time you have, and the attention that you have, which is the most coveted resource right now in our tech age, is our attention, right? The attentional economy, they call it. To, you don't feel good after 90 minutes, and you're like, I didn't really give that.
Right.
Scammed.
Right.
And so honestly, my teens are really good. They talk a lot. So Anna Lemke uses the phrase self-binding, and I think that's a phrase that gets used a lot in addiction recovery. But the idea that like you can temporally bind your device, you can categorically bind your device. So for me, I have categorical self-binding, which means I don't have socials on my phone.
Okay.
Because for me, it was just like I needed a categorical self-binding. When I had socials on my phone, I couldn't resist.
Mm-hmm.
But I have one teen who she just has timers on her app, so she can't get onto her socials until like 6 p.m. at night. And so that's a temporal self-binding technique. So to your point, it's really hard once you get into the space, and people talk about this all the time in addiction recovery. Your self-will. I don't think my own personal will can overcome the brain hacking designed by a social scientist. It's going to be very hard,
right,
for me. But if I can get ahead of it, if I can not drive down the street where the bar is, right? If I can, then that helps. That's a huge part of it. But we need each other to come up with these ideas, because it's not the same for each one. And that's the power of a support group, right? Where you can say, oh my God, that might work for me. I'm going to try that.
Well, and it's cool that these teens have each other. They know they're on the same page, because you might want to reduce your screen time, and it's not going to help if all your friends are just noses in the phone. So that's really cool that if they're in the disconnect group, they know they have a like-minded teen with them, who, if they say like, hey, I was thinking that we could go to the mall, or we could go to the zoo, or we could go to the whatever, and I was thinking maybe we wouldn't bring our phones. What do you think? Like, somebody who's not in the group might be like, are you crazy? And somebody who's in the group might be like, yeah, actually, that's kind of a fun idea. Let's take a hike, and let's not take our phones, and just see how we feel and see what happens.
Yeah, one of the kids who comes to the group, she is at a school where they don't have a phone-free policy, or they don't have really much of a policy around phones, so kids are just on their phones all the time. And she said that she started at lunch. She started a lunch table where you could only come and sit at the table, and it was her and her group of friends, which she was the initiator, if you put your phone in the middle.
Oh.
And I was like, good for you. And she's like, yeah, some people don't like it. They don't want to come to the table. But she's like, but then a bunch of people do. And they put their phone in the middle, and we sit and have, that's all peer motivated. No teacher's telling them to do that. There's no policy. They are doing, and that's my goal, is to get kids who are being that leadership forward, like being that much of a leader in their community. Because honestly, that's when teens make changes.
Yeah.
Is when they have their peers making choices, and then they're like, I want to make that choice too. But it's so hard to do, because having that social device in your pocket, or not having access to it rather, is like missing 100 parties.
Yeah.
The YOLO, or the FOMO rather, the fear of missing out, at least what they communicate to me is profound in a way that we adults can't understand. It's a generational gap.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I can't even imagine. I mean, because it was everything in junior high and high school to, to just be connected. And I mean, we talked on the
like,
phone
remember
for
everyone going to the
hours.
mall and then you didn't get to go? And it was like,
Yeah,
Mom, you have to let me go to the mall. Everyone's
absolutely.
there, right?
Or like when my
And
mom was
so
like, you got bad grades, you can't hang on the phone at night. It was like, oh, I sobbed and sobbed. Even though I saw these people all day long at school, it was like, I still need to talk to them on the phone for 2 hours tonight, please. So
that's
like,
one harm reduction technique that the teens have been using and they taught me to do, which is to get on FaceTime with people at night
oh yeah,
instead
that's
of
cool.
scrolling. So they'll do group FaceTimes. They will. I've asked them. They're like, my number one tip that they'll give to people is to go on FaceTime instead of, because then your phone's in use and
Yeah.
you're hanging with someone. But they'll do homework together. They'll hang out. They'll listen to music. They'll do all kinds of things for hours on FaceTime. You can have multiple people come into FaceTime. I think that's great. That's a great example of using your screen to
Right.
connect, to be together, to socialize. But it also, I love it because it occupies the phone, so
Right.
you can't scroll.
You can't do the double screen.
Yeah.
So you are in Milwaukee, is that right?
Mhm.
Um, how could people get involved? Like, they could go see your website.
Mhm.
What's your website?
www.disconnectme.org.
Okay. And obviously, if they're in the Milwaukee area, they could join a group.
Mhm.
How could they get involved with you guys if they're not in Milwaukee?
Great question. So we host our digital wellness workshops virtually.
Cool.
And that would be the number one thing I would encourage people to do is to book a workshop with us. And we're happy to host it virtually and basically get a conversation rolling with your community on how we can better support digital wellness. It starts with the workshop, experiencing the meeting model and experiencing the format and talking to a teen who's been through this recovery process is is the key entry point. Um, and we're hoping that with these digital wellness workshops becoming more popular and pushing out into all communities, we can start creating more meaningful programming and groups, not just here in Milwaukee, but around the country. That would be the goal, really.
So if somebody wanted to start something like this in their own town, they could take your workshop and that will help them learn the model.
That would be the training, but that would be the first step to being exposed to it.
Okay.
And then we would start to work on facilitating training for them. Mhm. And I have a I have a facilitator who's trained in Philadelphia as well.
Okay.
So we have someone trained in Philly, and then I have someone who I'm working on training in Minnesota right now.
Okay.
So we have some facilitators that are starting to be ready to for go time and
Yay. I
to
love this.
host some more workshops in person. Yeah,
Great.
but honestly, for teens, any anyone among your listeners who work directly with teens in their schools, I would love to have a conversation about bringing our program more meaningfully into a school environment. Right now, I've been working on really establishing the framework and making it feel really good and then translating it to the workshop. But our next step really is to start school programming meaningfully. So I'm actively in the process of talking to schools about what it looks like to bring them in. But like we were talking about earlier, it takes a little bit of reframing what we're doing in schools.
Hmm.
This kind of meeting format would be great for like a homeroom.
Yeah. Like morning
You know,
meeting type thing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What's the best way people could get in touch with you?
Well, there's a contact on our website, but they can also email me at K-A-T, at disconnectme.org.
Okay. Excellent. I have one last question that I'm asking everybody at the end of each episode, because along with all of, playing more, doing less screens, part of what Jonathan Haidt is suggesting is that we give kids more independence, more responsibility. And so I am curious, what is one of the first times you remember doing something totally independent that your parents weren't around? And like,
Mm.
how did that make you feel?
I love that question.
Mine's not that amazing. I feel like I got to walk to the bus stop when I was 5. I think I was walking to the
Oh,
bus
that's
stop
fun.
for kindergarten. So, I don't necessarily remember thinking, wow, this is so amazing. But I am noticing, wait a minute, I was 5. I don't think I would have let my kid do that when he was
Right.
5. And I'm trying so hard to start letting my kids do more things on their own. Do you have
It's hard though.
a memory? Maybe it's not the
So I
first time,
do,
but just one time when you
you
just remember.
Yeah, you mentioning the bus brought up. I remember the first day. So when I was in kindergarten, we rode the bus, but it was half day kindergarten, and so I was like one of 2 kids on the bus. And the bus driver literally, instead of stopping at the traditional like spot he was supposed to, he would just pull up to my driveway and let me out.
Awesome.
And my mom had little kids, so it was helpful to her. She didn't have to walk down the block to get me. And so I remember that being like so nice because I would just get out of my driveway and walk inside, and my mom loved it too. But in first grade, that's full day. And I had to take the bus home with all of the big kids and find the bus from school and like do all of that. And I remember the first day I was raised in Minnesota. And I remember the first day of class. I was so nervous all day. I was so hyper focused on having to find my way to the right bus and get on the right bus. I was thinking I was going to get on the wrong bus or whatnot. And I went up to my teacher and during a quiet work time, and I said, "Excuse me." And again, this is a first grader, so my understanding of geography was limited. And I knew my city was Minneapolis, but I said, "When does the bus for Minnesota leave?" And I remember it so clearly because it was me trying to find out a bus schedule and a location by myself and get myself there. And I didn't quite understand that I lived in Minneapolis, which was in the state of Minnesota. So I just asked when the bus for Minnesota left. But I remember she was like, she told me, "You'll figure it out." And I panicked.
Oh.
But guess what? I did.
Yep.
Because I walked through the school building all by myself, didn't have a teacher helping me, didn't have any adult helping me, found where the buses were. And I remember there were 3 buses. And I stood there and I looked around and I realized, oh, there's a sign that says like where I'm supposed to go. And I read it and I got on the bus.
Perfect.
And I had been so freaked out. I was having tons of internal panic, tons of internal anxiety. But I did it. And then I did it every day after that.
And I was going to say, it probably made you feel pretty awesome at that age of like, I figured it out. It's like, I can figure out other stuff.
Yeah. And I don't need someone to always spell it out for me.
Right. Right.
Like I can be put into a situation where I feel a little in over my head. And then that's how I grow.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so very much. It was absolutely wonderful to talk to you. And I'm excited for people to be able to use this in their schools, in their everyday life, in their friend groups. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you for listening to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. A special thanks to Neil Penninger, who composed our theme music. Please join us at screenlessplaymore.com for ideas on how to get your kids outside, away from screens, and enjoying independent play. We also have book reviews, screen-free toy and gift ideas, and so much more.